Warning, incoming goblin. Warning, incoming game. You get it, it's a reboot reference.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. I'm also sponsored by Face to Face Games, Canada's premier Magic the Gathering store. Using the promo code MTGMudsta will get you 5% off site-wide, with eligible orders getting free shipping Canada-wide. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game features my Miirym Sentinel Worm deck, and it's playing Temur Dragons. I keep a Snow-Covered Island, Wooded Foothills, Patron of the Arts, Valakut Awakening, and Sarkhan's Triumph. MJ is playing their Ramos Dragon Engine deck, which is a Lucky Charms deck, playing a lot of cards that have multiple colors in them to pump up their commander. They keep Chromatic Lantern, Cloven Casting, Darrigaz's Charm, Conflux, Misty Rainforest, Forest, and an Underground Sea. Max is playing Jon Irenicus, wanting to donate away his creatures so they beat up his opponents, keeping Dimir Doppelganger, Sol Ring, Wayfarer's Bauble, Talisman of Dominance, Island, Swamp, and Myriad Landscape. Nick is playing his budget-friendly Radiant and Siani deck, which is basically focused on flyers. He keeps an Empyrean Eagle, Rally of the Wings, Sacred Mesa, Arcane Signet, Marble Diamond, and 2 Plains. MJ wins the die roll and starts us off. They draw, playing a Misty Rainforest and cracking it to find a tap land. I play a Wooded Foothills and also crack it to go and find a tap land, passing to Nick. Nick draws and plays a Plains, passing. Max has a land for turn and casts Sol Ring. He taps that for a Talisman of Dominance, and the Talisman of Dominance for a Wayfarer's Bauble. After an explosive turn 1, he ships it to MJ. MJ's got a Scalding Tarn for turn, cracking it and losing 1 to find a land and passing to me. I display a Snow-Covered Island, passing to Nick. Nick draws, plays an island, and taps 2 for a tapped Marble Diamond. Max is an island for turn, and is able to cast a Phyrexian Arena. He passes to MJ after that. MJ draws and plays a Forest. They then cast Chromatic Lantern, passing. I draw for turn, playing a Hinterland Harbor before casting Valakut Awakening. I put all cards from my hand on the bottom and draw 5, passing after that. Nick plays an island and taps 2 for an Arcane Signet. He then taps enough for an Empyrean Eagle and passes through his phases. During his end step, Max cracks the Wayfarer's Bauble to go and find a swamp. Max draws from the arena, losing 1, and plays a Myriad Landscape after drawing for turn. He then casts his commander, Jon Irenicus, and passes after that. MJ plays an Underground Sea and casts their own Sol Ring. They then play out a Mirari's Wake, passing. I draw and play a Snow-Covered Mountain. I then tap enough for a Thunderbreak Regent, passing to Nick. Nick's got a Plains for turn and casts Siani. Going to combat, he swings the Eagle at MJ, and after it connects, passes. Max plays an island and casts Mimic Vat and then a Sky Diamond. He goes to combat, swinging his commander at MJ. After Jon connects, he moves to his end step and gives Jon away to Nick before passing turn. MJ draws and plays a Tome of the Guild Pact. They then cast Cloven Casting and get to draw a card from the tome. I draw and play a Breeding Pool, having it come in untapped and taking 2. I then cast a Clouth's Will to destroy the Mirari's Wake and Phyrexian Arena. Moving to combat, I swing the Thunderbreak Regent at Nick, and after it connects, pass. Nick draws and goes straight to combat. He swings Jon Irenicus at me for 5 as it's goaded, and then swings Siani and the Empyrean Eagle at max. Nick gets to scry 2 from Siani, and his creatures then hit. In his post-combat main phase, he plays a Hanged Executioner, and follows that with a Cartographer's Hawk. He passes after that. Max draws and plays an island. He then plays a Fleshbag Marauder, and everyone sacrifices a creature as it resolves. Max then puts the Marauder under the Mimic Vat, and passes turn. MJ draws, playing out a Solemn Simulacrum. They go to grab a swamp, and pass while searching. My turn has me drawing and casting Farseek, going to put to field a Sheltered Thicket. I then play Otawara as my land for turn, and don't want to cast any creatures with a Fleshbag Marauder under a Mimic Vat. Nick draws, and plays a Plains. Going to combat, he swings Jon at me again, and the birds go at MJ, and Siani and the Hanged Executioner go at Max. Before moving to blockers, Max once more activates the Mimic Vat to make a token copy of the Fleshbag Marauder. This has all of his opponents sacrificing a creature, and MJ gets to draw as the Solemn Simulacrum dies, and then responds by casting a Treva's Charm, copying it with Cloven Casting, to exile both of Nick's birds. Nick at least gets a few scry triggers out of combat, and after that, they connect, and in his second main phase, Nick plays out Radiant, passing turn. Max draws, but with nothing else, passes. MJ draws and plays an Arid Mesa, cracking it and going to find Aspara's headquarters. They then play Elsa of the Infinite, drawing off the Tome of the Guildpact. After that, they pass. I have a Cavern of Souls coming in, naming dragons. With that Fleshbag Marauder trigger still on the board, I pass turn. Nick draws and plays Sacred Mesa. And this has Max activating the Mimic Vat. The Fleshbag Marauder token comes in, and MJ sacrifices their only creature, while Nick sacrifices Siani. Moving to combat, Nick swings Radiant at Max, while Max channels Otawara, bouncing Radiant to Nick's hand. Nick is also swinging Jon Irenicus at me once more, and I take the hit, and Nick passes. Max has a Strionic Resonator coming in during his main phase, and then plays a Dimir Doppelganger, activating it and targeting my Thunderbreak Regent. MJ responds by casting a Daragaz's Charm, copying it with Cloven Casting to deal 6 damage to the Doppelganger. With nothing big enough to copy in the graveyard to save it, the Doppelganger dies, and Max passes turn. MJ draws and plays Conflux. They get Feather the Redeemed, Smothering Tithe, Rakdos Charm, 3 Visits, and Whirlwind of Thought. They then play the Rakdos Charm to destroy the Mimic Vat, becoming the hero of the table, and pass after that. I draw and play an Arcane Signet. And once that's resolved, cast my commander, Miirym, Sentinel Dragon. After that, I pass, and Nick makes 2 Pegasi on my end step. Nick sacrifices a Pegasus on his upkeep to the Sacred Mesa, and draws. He plays a Steel Plume Marshal, and goes to combat. This time around, Jon Irenicus goes at MJ, and the Pegasus goes at Max. They both connect, and Nick passes after that. Max has a Sir Conrad in his main phase, but nothing else, and has to pass. MJ plays an Arcane Signet, and then casts Feather. They then play a Smothering Tithe, passing. I draw for turn, and pay the 2 for the Smothering Tithe tax, before casting an Ancient Bronze Dragon, and making a token copy of it with Miirym. Leaving Miirym back on defense, I decide to pass turn. Nick sacrifices a Pegasus on his upkeep, and then draws, paying the 2 for the Tithe tax. Going to combat, he swings Jon Irenicus at MJ again, and the birds at Max. Both players take their beats, and after that, Nick passes. Max draws, and pays for the Smothering Tithe, but has nothing else to do and passes. During his end step, MJ casts Ramoka's command. They pick the modes to put a +1/+1 counter onto Feather, and has Nick sacrificing an enchantment. Nick responds to this by making 2 Pegasus. Dramoka's command gets exiled under Feather, and MJ then takes their turn. MJ draws and plays a Whirlwind of Thought. They then cast Ramos and pass. On my upkeep, I cast Worldly Tutor, going to grab Scion of Draco, and then drawing it for turn. I then cast the Scion, making a token copy with Miirym. Moving to combat, I swing the Ancient Bronze Dragon at MJ and 1 at Nick. MJ responds by using Simic Charm to buff Ramos and blocks it, while Nick takes the hit. I roll a 15 on my d20 and put 15 +1/+1 counters onto my commander and the Bronze Dragon. I then pass after that. Nick plays a commander's insignia in his main phase and then goes to combat. He swings the Steel Plume Marshal at Max and the Pegasus and Jon Irenicus at MJ. This has MJ responding by casting Dramoka's command again and paying to copy it, choosing to fight a creature and sacrifice an enchantment as the modes. Ramos fights Jon Irenicus and makes him sacrifice the commander's insignia, while Feather fights the Steel Plume Marshal. Sir Conrad sees these creatures dying and deals 2 damage to the table, and MJ then trades a Pegasus for Feather and takes 6, with Sir Conrad dealing another 2. After that, Nick passes, and during his end step, Max activates Sir Conrad 5 times, hitting a total of 5 creatures and dealing a total of 5 damage. Max draws and casts Living Death. 7 creatures other than Sir Conrad die, which deals 7 damage to the table and takes MJ out. We then swap our battlefields for our graveyards, which gives Max a bunch of creatures, while I only get an Atarka, and Nick gets a Hanged Executioner, Steel Plume Marshal, and a Windreader Sphinx. Max resolves his trigger for the Gilded Drake, swapping it for my Atarka, and passing after that. I draw and recast Miirym again, and then go to combat. I swing the Gilded Drake at Max, who eats it with Atarka, and pass turn. During my end step, Nick sacrifices his Hanged Executioner to exile Atarka before moving to his turn. Nick has a Plains for turn, and goes to combat, and before declaring attackers, Max uses Swift End on the Sphinx, but Nick responds with a Render Silent to save it. Nick then swings his team at Max, getting to draw 3 cards. Max takes the full hit, and after that, Nick casts a Court of Grace, passes, and draws for being the Monarch at the end of turn. Max draws and plays a Port of Karfell. He then plays Sower of Temptation, and copies the Enter the Battlefield trigger with his Strionic Resonator. Stealing Miirym, and Nick's Windreader Sphinx. He then makes Dimir Doppelganger a copy of Sir Conrad, and goes to combat, swinging 5 points of damage at me, and the rest at Nick. Nick, however, has a Rally of the Wings to untap his creatures for some surprise blockers, and is able to trade the Fallen Shinobi and Jon Irenicus, while I unfortunately die. Nick does take 4 damage from Sir Conrad though, and Max passes after that. Nick makes an Angel from the Court of Grace and draws her turn. He plays an island and casts a Kirtar's Wrath, wiping the board and making 2 spirit tokens. He takes some damage from Sir Conrad seeing creatures dying, and then passes, drawing at the end of turn from being the Monarch. Max draws and plays Jon Irenicus again. He then passes, and during his end step, Nick flashes in a Thunderclap Wyvern. Nick makes an Angel because he's still the Monarch, and draws. He goes to combat, swinging the team at Max, who responds by activating Port of Karfell to reanimate the Sower of Temptation, and I'm surprised you can't only do this at sorcery speed. The Sower steals the Angel, and eats the Thunderclap Wyvern, while Max still takes 2 from the spirits. In Nick's post-combat main phase, he plays a Dream Trawler, and then a Myria Angel. He then plays a Plains and gets a landfall trigger from the Myria Angel, making a bird token. After that, he passes. Max draws and swings out at Nick. Nick blocks the Sower with a Dream Trawler, Jon Irenicus with the Emeria Angel, and the Angel token with his bird. This has Nick gaining 3 from lifelink, and in his second main phase, Max wipes the board with Damnation. Max then replays Jon Irenicus, passing. Nick once more makes an Angel from the Court trigger and draws. He then plays Radiant and passes, drawing the end of turn from being the Monarch. Max draws, but with no more tricks up his sleeves, he scoops it up to the Air Force. Game review time. Once more, Nick's budget fire-based deck rocked this table, and I'm starting to wonder if all of your creatures having built-in evasion isn't just really good. That, plus the fact that he's getting a ton of scries from Siani, and kinda some protection from Radiant, means that Nick can go on the offensive quite early on. I had to mulligan aggressively to get the hand that I had, and although it wasn't the best, I think that Valakut Awakening really put me back in the game. Plus I got to play 2 of my favorite cards in the deck, which is the Ancient Bronze Dragon, because I love rolling dice and making creatures big, and Scion of Draco, because it just gives so much value with keywords. Max unfortunately didn't draw too many cards to Jon Irenicus to give away, and as a result had to give away his own commander to really get any kind of value. The problem with that though, is although your commander is doing commander damage to 2 other opponents, you don't get to choose where it goes, and if the opponent controlling Jon Irenicus decides not to kill anyone with commander damage, you're kind of in a bind. Having played against MJ's Lucky Charm deck, everyone at the table kinda knew what to expect. Lots of powerful spells with different modes definitely were coming our way, and I knew I had to deal with that Mirari's Wake early on, because keeping them off of double mana was basically what was keeping us in the game. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.